So I've decided that I'm going to start trying to do short videos that apply philosophical concepts to real world events as they are happening in order to help my audience apply philosophy to their lives. These are intended to be short, bite sized concepts to help further current debates using the scaffolding of philosophical concepts and to help cut through the sophistry and rhetoric that plagues all of these discussions in the mainstream. So, this one is going to be on first and second analogies, or analogous reasoning, and how it pertains to hate speech. So, first off, we have to understand what univocal use of a word means and what equivocation means. So, the univocal use of a word is when a term is used in exactly the same sense when it's applied to different subjects. So, for example, when we say Socrates is human or Plato is human, we are using the word human univocally. It means precisely the same thing in both cases. An equivocation is like the word bank or pin. It's when the word has the same sound, but doesn't mean anything remotely the same. So if I say I'm going to the bank, well, do I mean the bank of a river or do I mean the bank where they put money, right? I have to clarify which bank I'm going to. And this can get us into a lot of problems with language. So, that out of the way, then, we are then going to next deal with what an analogy is. An analogy is used in ways that are partly the same and partly different. They bear a genuine resemblance. So, for example, when I say Socrates is healthy and food are healthy, Socrates possesses health properly, while the food is only in relation to causing Socrates' health. The classical example, and I would say kind of the mnemonic, easy to remember example, is urine. That urine does not possess health itself, but can be a sign of health. Okay, so we then make a distinction between what's called a first analogy and a second analogate. So, health belonging to Socrates is health in the full sense of the word, whereas health belonging to urine only belongs to urine insofar as it is a sign of Socrates' health. So, another example, just to try to flesh this out a little bit further, of my own would be poison. If I were to say cyanide is a poison to the body and propaganda is a poison to the mind, this is a proper analogy. It's called an analogy proportionality. And it's because both substances destroy their respective systems. Both work by infiltrating and disrupting normal healthy functions. Poison is the first analogy. It's the proper idea of what a poison is, or excuse me, cyanide is a proper poison, while propaganda is still a poison in that it can destroy your cognitive system, but it is not poison in the full sense of the word. It works by operating according to the same mechanisms. So that when something is ingested with poison, we say that it destroys you biologically, whereas if we say that propaganda is poisonous, it's destructive to your cognitive systems. So what is shared in both is this destructive infiltration to a system. Okay, so this is what's important with an analogy: is it has a true shared analogate. So these can be easily confused with metaphor. So if I were to say she is a flower, that would be a metaphor. Or similar, if I were to make a comparison such as she smells like a flower, that's a simile. You can also have a personification like the sun is angry. And that's when I give non-human things human qualities. So analogies we have to kind of separate from these other word attributes or word functions. Analogies are used to produce real forms of knowledge rather than poetic additions to language. So, again, urine being healthy is a real form of knowledge about my health. I'm not simply speaking politically about my urine. If I say a woman is a flower, I'm not really giving you a true knowledge. I mean, the woman isn't actually a flower. So an analogy serves explanatory and predictive functions. It allows us to transform knowledge, to predict outcomes, and to develop countermeasures, such as the poison example, which would allow me then to research what I need to do for biological toxicity or to have a data detox or a cognitive detox of propaganda. Okay. So, now, how does this pertain to hate speech? In hate, the first analogy properly belongs to an action like murder, where one destroys another human being in their entirety, both physically and psychologically. Whereas dead naming or using the wrong pronoun, for example, at very most can be psychologically destructive to an individual, with the words themselves not taken alone would cause a biological destruction. In this way, it is an analogy to murdering. And we also find this in the Gospels, where Christ says to hate your enemy is to murder them in your heart, indicating that there is also an intentional aspect of hate. Okay, so that hate is a description of an internal state of intentionality in the will, and that hate speech is an expression of that intentionality. The problem with hate speech, however, is no one knows another's intention, except for the person who formed it. It's very easy for someone to outwardly misread someone's intentions. For example, I might help an old lady across the street and be perceived as helping the old lady. But what the perceiver may not see is that there is an attractive young lady who I have been trying to impress in a second-story building looking out the window at that moment, and that is what's truly motivated me to then grab this old lady and help her across the street. You see this all the time in kind of comedic scenarios in movies, right? So I'm doing a good act, but my intentions are not necessarily to help the old lady. My intentions have other incentives. So this is what's the problem with accusing people of hate speech. We don't often fully perceive the context and circumstances that cause someone to act or say something. And with that, we can misread someone's intent in the words that they say. And this is often the case with comedians who will say objectively horrendous things. I think of some of the stuff CK, what's his name? Well, you guys know the guy I'm talking about, I think. He'll say objectively horrendous things, but within the context and circumstances of the comedy club, the intent is to make people laugh. They don't truly express his feelings. He's playing a role and he's playing a character. And so, taken out of context, you can hear something like that or even see him speaking it and not understanding the context, think that he is just speaking his heart, his intentions. Okay. So the other speech act we're going to briefly look at then is what's called constitutive speech acts. And this is where we give a described report or state of facts about the world. And this is often what's also deemed as hate speech, since facts can add to a negative perception of another person. For example, crime statistics among ethnic groups, where I describe them. Some may accuse me of perpetuating negative stereotypes, regardless of what my intent is. The problem is, again, you don't know my intent. So you don't know if it's an expression of my hate for an ethnic group. You can only judge the expression itself. In this way, hate speech, accusing people of hate speech, is an extremely judgmental thing to do, because you are claiming to have insight into another person's intent. You are claiming to be able to read their intent. The other difference with hate speech is that even if it's an intended destruction towards a group or a person, it is still only operating on a very limited power to bring about that destructive potential. So hate speech is categorically distinct from physical violence, which is motivated by hate. The destructive potential can be amplified by other actors who will act on my hate speech if I give an order, for example, but they are still, regardless, responsible for their own agency. I do not cause their actions. They cause their actions. That's what it means to be responsible for their agency. unless they are under the jurisdiction of the speaker. In the case of like a military hierarchy, where they can be court-martialed for disobeying an order. And even then, they can still act against it. There's just consequences for acting against that speech act, okay? So we have to make these distinctions. We can't just cobble them all together in a mess, in a muddied form. We do have to be able to, you know, make distinctions in what's happening around us. So these forms of hate require a far more complicated and causal mechanism to bring about the destruction desired than simple physical violence does. Speech itself is an incomplete causal structure to bring about the end it desires. Okay, it requires other causal actors. And as mentioned before, it may be able to cause psychological destruction, but this too is not always the intention of the speaker and can be accidental or even be a positive intention. For example, if a doctor told me I had been diagnosed with cancer, that is going to have a huge psychological effect on me. But his intent is to help me. This is part of the process of me getting health. The destruction, like surgery, is part of the process in the health. Okay, so even psychologically destructive speech can be done in the name of health. So, in conclusion, we certainly should be careful with our words, and we certainly should spend more of our time policing our own intentions rather than assuming we understand the intentions of others, and concern ourselves not with having hateful intentions towards others, rather than, which what everyone is doing who uses the word hate speech, asserting a diagnostic authority in accurately seeing others' intentions. Okay? This is useless. This is judgmentalism in a religious sense. You almost certainly can't get an accurate diagnostic of someone else's intentions. Most people have a difficult time doing it for themselves. So, as destructive as hate speech may be potentially, it is still categorically distinct from murder itself, from physical hate, physical acts of hate. And we should not use hate in this univocal sense that we use hate and hate speech as though murder and inciting violence are the same thing. No one is under a military command when someone incites violence. You are responsible for the violence you commit. Again, we can bring in psychological factors, but let's assume most people are, for the most part, mentally healthy. So we need to cultivate a more sophisticated and nuanced understanding of language and moral acts, which is what I'm trying to help in this video. And we should do this in order to have a more productive dialogue on social issues. So if you like this or want to add something to it, please add in the comments. I will try to leave a outline of this so that you can kind of review. And yeah, let me know if this is a format that you find productive, and I will try to make more of them. Thank you.